Thank you so much for the invitation. It's the first time that I'm in South Africa, and I'm very thrilled about this. I'm speaking here not as an economist and not as a objective person, but I'm a trade unionist, and it was our trade union, our service sector trade union, inventing and promoting the demand of a legal minimum wage. Yeah. What I wanted to present you mainly are 2 points: the economic situation, the impacts of our minimum wage. It is a short but rather happy story. And the second point is the minimum wage law, the provisions of the minimum wage law, and the problems of implementation. The short story of the German minimum wage. We have only 1 year of experience because the German minimum wage was introduced in January 2015, so it's 1 year and 1 month. And the law establishes €8 per hour. It's an hourly minimum wage. And when we take a full-time job with about 38 hours, it is 50% of the median. So it is not a very high minimum wage. It's a very low minimum wage in our eyes. And to say it frankly, for the trade unionists, it's always too low. But the minimum wage, to make a short summary, is enormously successful because we have still a growing economy, less unemployment, more and better jobs, up to 20% higher salaries there where they were needed most. You will ask me, can you have serious figures about this point so shortly after 1 year? And I can tell you, yes, the figures have to be treated cautiously. This is quite normal. But we had a huge minimum wage conference on Thursday and Friday last week, and we had with our Minister of Labor, and with 2 new studies. One study is of our own trade union research institute, and the second study is of the research institute of the Minister of Labor, and both have less or more the same results. So there is no big variation between the both results. So we can rely relatively good on these figures. It is now 10 years of fighting. The minimum wage, I told it already, is a trade union's baby. And the first trade unions coming up with the demand of a legal minimum wage was the food workers and hospitality trade union, and then us, we are the United Service Sector Trade Union. It's quite as big as IG Metall. It's a fusion of 5 smaller service sector trade unions. So, and we represent public and private services. And the big campaign started in 2005 with the against working poverty and for a living wage. And it was the first time that the public opinion was confronted with the idea that we are no more living in a in a high-wage country. We are living still in a rich country, but no more in a high-wage country. And it was a very rough, a very tough discussion in the trade union family. I will come back to this point later in the other presentation this afternoon, because it is not in our tradition. Our tradition is very much fixed on collective bargaining. And the industry trade unions were for a long time not in favor for the demand of a legal minimum wage, but in the end, finally, 2006, we convinced them, and the whole confederation came up with a demand for a legal minimum wage of €8.50 per hour. Why that late? I will come back to this also, the reasons why we demanded the legal minimum wage in the second presentation. Since the 90s, we had a growing inequality and growing low-wage sector. And it was very interesting that even initially we had a big support from public opinion. Up to from 80 to 90%, now it's even more, from 80 to 90%, even followers of the right-wing and liberal parties were in favor for a legal minimum wage in Germany. But now has been a very huge and hard campaign of the enemies and the hostile forces against the legal minimum wage. And since the start of the discussion was a massive media campaign of most of our neoliberal economic and political organizations, the economic research institutes, and also the mass media. There have been horrible economic forecasts that the whole economy would collapse, and forecasts with up to 2 million job losses. And it was a continuous campaign. We campaigned in favor for a legal minimum wage, but the campaign against was much larger and with much more money in the background. And now it continues. The reality shows that the prognosis was completely wrong, but this is not a cause for apology, no. The argument is now it is still too early to see the expected bad effects. And now we have the situation of the immigration of more than 1 million refugees. These refugees are used now in the argumentation against the minimum law to reduce, to split, or even to abolish the minimum wage law. I think this is rather shaming. Now to the economic situation. This is a graph from the Research Institute of the Minister of Labor, and it shows the development of the gross domestic product. So you see the I don't know how to use it. The vertical line is the introduction. The vertical line is the introduction of the legal minimum wage, and you see that in the line there is not even a slight irritation of the development upward. And also, in contrast to many forecasts, there are no job losses, but a booming labor market. In In Germany, there have been never more employees than in December 2015. And what is very interesting, because for a long time we had an increase in labor, but it was more of short-term labor. The full-time labor was got lower, and the part-time and even the very low number of hours got higher, and now it's for the first time that we have an increase also in the volume of labor. And we have about 500 more regular and jobs than in the last year. What was going down was the irregular, our mini jobs with no social insurance, and no taxes for the employee. This is a special invention in Germany. There was a decrease of 100 marginal jobs, but half of them has now regular jobs. This is the graph of the employment. The positive trend continues. And another effect is now that there are higher salaries with the national minimum wage for about 5 million employees. 5 million workers have now higher salaries. Who is affected? And there are what matters? Gender matter. 10% of all male employees have higher wages, but 20% of all women workers have higher wages. Age matters. First of all young people, or young workers and old workers under 25 and over 66, 40% of them have higher wages. The others only 10%. Skills matter. The unskilled is about 30% of the unskilled have higher wages, and the contract matters. The fixed-term contract workers, 30% of them have higher wages, and with unlimited contract only 10%. And there is only a small difference between migrants or indirect migrants or no migrants. It's only 3% each. There are also structural differences, regional difference. For example, the regions in Germany are very unequally concerned. In Eastern Germany, 20 to 30% of all employees have now higher wages, and in the West it's only 10 to 15. There are sectoral differences. The most affected sectors are, for example, hospitality with about 50%, agriculture with 30%, retail trade 30%, transport 20%, other services 20%, health 15%, construction only 7%. Another point is the size of the enterprises. Here I show you a graph. Very big enterprises are affected. The workers in very big enterprises are affected less, but the workers in small enterprises up to more than 40%. There are also some effects on the public finances and the economy. Now the government has to pay less additional social benefits, but not so much less, because €8.50, with €8.50, even with a full-time job, you have always the right on additional social benefits. Yes, and there are more taxes for the Minister of Finance now, but it is too early to have the concrete figures. One point is very important, that actually the growth in domestic demand is considered as the main reason for the macroeconomic stability in Germany. Now I want to come back to the provisions of the legal minimum wage. It is quite interesting that this law is called law to strengthen collective bargaining, because collective bargaining in Germany is in the center of this the wage policy. Yes, there is a possibility of deviation. First of all, through extended, collectively agreed, but extended and now generally binding regional, branch minimum wages. But this exception is only valid till the end of 2016. In some few branches, like agriculture, like hairdressers, and also temporary agency work. But this ends in the end of 2016. Some employee groups are not covered by the minimum wage, and we as trade unions are not happy about this. Trainees, young workers under 18, long-term employment during the first 6 months. So when a long-term unemployed finds new work for the first 6 months, he has no right on the legal minimum wage. But in the practice, we know now that is not really adapted. And there are also temporary special provisions for newspaper deliverers and seasonal workers. There is now established a minimum wage commission with 3 representatives each from the employer, the trade union sides, and 2 academic advisors with no voice, and 1 chair. And the commission will make proposals to the relevant minister for changes to the minimum wage, changes, adaptation to the minimum wage every 2 years only, and the first proposal will take effect from January 2017. Now I want to speak about the implementation. There was a big information campaign of the Minister of Labor and also of our confederation, with a hotline where everybody could call and ask how to deal with the minimum wage. And there have been thousands of telephone calls or emails with questions, first with questions, and then also with reports about abuse as well. For the institution that controls is the customs. The customs is at the Minister of Finance, and the customs controls the enterprises. It's a holistic control, because the customs is also responsible for the control of illegal work. So they control whether an enterprise doesn't pay taxes, has illegal work employed, or doesn't pay the minimum wage. So there have been 25,000 controls, holistic controls, but only 300 problematic cases. And when the law is non-applied, there can be, the enterprises can be punished with a bond to €500,000, and the exclusion from the public assignment. But the problem is that the customs has not enough controllers. So they could do more to control the minimum wage. But in general, it is estimated from the Research Institute of the Minister of Labor that the compliance of the employers is relatively high. What problems we have with the implementation? There is a discussion about additional wage benefits. Some employers don't want to pay anymore the yearly benefits for holidays or at the end of the year. There is a discussion about working time, because when you have an hourly minimum wage, there is a problem with the definition of working time. There is a problem also with the documentation of the working time, because without the documentation of the working time, it is not possible to control really the adoption of the law of the minimum wage. And there are some cases, we have only single cases, but not a statistic overview about the trials to escape the minimum wage. Yes, some employers pay now less additional salary components. They demand a higher working time and make more pressure, so you have to work more. And they make new contracts, so with less working time for €8.50 less hours, but you have to work more time without being paid. And there is a new invention of unpaid work also in hospitals, voluntary work, unpaid voluntary works, and there is also the possibility to reduce the holidays. Now it's very interesting. What rules do we have to come to a higher minimum wage? So the Commission we have has a very limited freedom, because the Commission have to orient at the average of the collectively agreed pay raise. This has to be the orientation for the minimum wage commission, and when we calculate this, the data came from our statistic bureau. The adaptation, this is the average collectively agreed wage is about 3% for 12 months. And the adaptation in January 2017 would lead to a minimum wage of less than €9. And we have the problem that our organization demands €10 at least. And €10, I want to come back in what context we have this demand. The average wage in Germany is about €25. The limit for additional social benefits is at about €11.50, and poverty wages, that means 50% of the average is at €12.50. And so we see that this minimum wage and the procedure is still, we are not very happy about these possibilities of our minimum wage commission. And now we are discussing what can be done. And it was always in the whole time of the demand, the story of the fight for the legal minimum wage, that it was embedded in several policies as the policy of branch level minimum wages and collective bargaining rules in our own organization, and also in the policy of a European minimum wage. So when we compare, and we compare often with other European countries, countries in the European community, and so we see that Germany is at the bottom of the highly developed comparable countries now. And also when we look at the median, so we are at 50%, and our demand in Europe is that every country, after the own possibilities, has to come to 60% of the median with each minimum wage. So we are far away from this. The perspectives we are discussing, I cannot say this is my conclusions, because we are discussing now. We had this conference, and the question is, was the minimum wage successful? Yes, on the one hand, and no, because it's still too low, and there is no way to make a big step to a higher minimum wage. We demand a wage, at least a wage for everybody, no exceptions. But the problem is now discussed in the trade unions that the campaign for a legal minimum wage, we got no new members with this politics. And directly, but indirectly, it helped a lot for a better reputation of the trade unions. Our image is now much better than before, and so indirectly it leads we can convince more easy the persons to get members in the trade unions. We see that the implementation is a long procedure. We have to fight for a better minimum wage, for changes in the law, and fortunately the public opinion is our side. Now it is 94% of citizens who are in favor for our minimum wage, even when they have higher costs, for example, at hairdressers or in the taxis, they accept this. And we have to go on with our collective bargaining, but because now, when the legal minimum wage is oriented at the results of collective bargaining, we have to look for higher wages with collective bargaining, and this is also the point where I will come back in the afternoon. Thank you.